A paralyzed bobcat kitten is about to be put down. The decision seems final, until the mother appears. But what she does next shocks everyone. This isn't just instinct, it's something no one thought possible. Hunters close in, the clock is ticking, and survival hangs by a thread. Yet in the middle of fear and danger, one question tears through the silence. Can a mother's impossible act rewrite the fate of her broken child? Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. It turns this little corner of the internet into something bigger, something shared. The late-night stillness at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was shattered by the shrill ring of the emergency phone. Clara Donahue jolted awake in her small office chair, where she had dozed off during her evening shift. Her auburn hair had partly escaped its ponytail, and she quickly tucked the loose strands behind her ears as she grabbed the phone. Wildlife. Emergency response, she answered, her voice still thick with sleep. Got an injured bobcat kitten. The ranger's gruff voice came through. Found it on Highway 27. Back legs aren't moving. Bringing it in now. Clara's heart squeezed. She immediately began preparing the examination room, laying out soft towels and turning on the warming lamps. Her hands moved quickly but carefully, organizing the medical supplies they might need. The clock on the wall read 11:45 at night. 15 minutes later, the ranger arrived. In his arms was a small animal carrier, and Clara could hear tiny, distressed sounds coming from within. The ranger's face was grim as he set the carrier down on the examination table. Found it in the middle of the road, he explained. Must have been hit by a car. Wasn't moving much, but still alive. Clara opened the carrier carefully. Inside, pressed against the back corner, was one of the smallest bobcat kittens she had ever seen, despite its injury. Its golden eyes blazed, with a fierce light that made Clara catch her breath. The kitten's back legs lay motionless, but its front paws were tensed, ready to defend itself. Hey there, little fighter, Clara whispered, her heart already reaching out to the injured creature. She was about to begin a preliminary examination when Dr. Martin Caro strode into the room. His tall frame cast a shadow across the examination table, and his worn lab coat rustled as he moved. Clara had already called him, knowing that all serious cases needed the director's evaluation. Dr. Caro took one look at the kitten and shook. His head, paralyzed, he stated flatly, "We'll need to euthanize immediately, but we haven't even examined him properly." Clara protested, her voice rising with emotion. "We don't know for sure if the paralysis is permanent." Dr. Caro's stern features hardened. "Miss Donahue, you know as well as I do that a predator cannot survive without the use of its back legs. We don't have the resources to waste on hopeless cases." Clara felt her face flush with determination. "Please, Dr. Caro, just give me one night to observe him. We can't just give up without trying." "This isn't about trying," Dr. Caro said sharply. "This is about making practical decisions. A paralyzed bobcat can't survive in the wild. Euthanasia is the humane choice," but Clara couldn't take her eyes off the kitten's fierce gaze. There was something there, a spark, a will to live that she couldn't ignore. "One night," she pleaded. "Just one night to monitor him. If there's no improvement by morning, I won't argue further." Thunder rumbled outside, emphasizing the tension in the room. Dr. Caro looked from Clara to the kitten, his mouth set in a tight line. Clara held her breath, her hands unconsciously gripping the edge of the examination table. Finally, Dr. Caro exhaled sharply. "One night," he conceded, "but don't get attached. Miss Donahue, you can't save them all." As he left the room, Clara felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. The kitten was still watching her, its golden eyes reflecting the overhead lights. Outside, another roll of thunder shook the building, and rain began to patter against the windows. "Don't worry," she whispered to the kitten, carefully reaching for a small blanket to make it more comfortable. "I won't give up on you. Not without a fight." The kitten made a tiny sound, somewhere between a growl and a mew, as if acknowledging her words. Clara settled into a chair beside the examination table, preparing for a long night of observation. She knew that Dr. Caro was probably right. The odds were stacked against this tiny creature. But something in those golden eyes told her that this kitten wasn't ready to give up, and neither was she. The storm outside grew stronger, but Clara barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to this moment, this night, and the small life she was determined to protect. She began making detailed notes about the kitten's condition, clinging to hope as tenaciously as the kitten clung to life. The storm intensified as midnight crept past. Clara sat beside the examination table, her eyes fixed on the tiny patient before her. The kitten's breathing had steadied, though its back legs remained motionless. Every so often, its golden eyes would open, meeting her gaze with that same fierce light that had captured her heart. Thunder crashed outside, and Clara pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders. The empty wildlife center felt especially lonely at night, with only the soft whir of medical equipment and the occasional shuffling sounds from the other animal enclosures for company. As she watched the kitten, Clara's mind wandered to what had brought her here. After leaving college early to help with family troubles back home, she felt lost. But the first time she'd volunteered at the wildlife center, something had clicked into place. Animals didn't judge her choices or question her worth like people did. They simply needed help, and she could give it. She whispered to the kitten, Dr. Caro isn't always wrong. He's actually brilliant at what he does. She sighed, gently adjusting the heating pad beneath the small creature. But sometimes I think he forgets that every animal is more than just a case to be managed. The kitten's ear twitched at her voice, and Clara smiled. She'd seen countless animals fight against impossible odds. Some made it, some didn't, but she believed they all deserved a chance. Dr. Caro's cold efficiency might keep the center running smoothly, but it left no room for hope or miracles. Rain lashed against the windows, and Clara stood to check the kitten's vital signs again, as she recorded the temperature and heart rate. A sound cut through the storm, a deep, guttural cry that made the hair on her neck stand up. Clara froze, her pen hovering above the chart. The cry came again, closer. This time, her first thought was coyotes, and she hurried to check that all the enclosure doors were secure. But as she approached the window overlooking the compound's perimeter fence, another sound joined the first, a distinctive yowl that she recognized from her training, Bobcat. Pressing her face close to the glass, Clara squinted through the darkness, and lightning flashed, illuminating the grounds for a brief moment. There, just beyond the fence, a large shape moved in the shadows. Another flash revealed more detail, a muscular body, tufted ears, and a coat that gleamed reddish-brown. Even in the dim light, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The bobcat was massive for a female, and even through the rain, she could see the scars that marked its face and body. One ear was noticeably torn, testament to past battles. But what struck Clara most were the animal's eyes. They glowed in the darkness like amber flames, fixed intently on the building. "Oh my God," Clara whispered, realization dawning. "You're the mother." The bobcat, Red Claw as she was known to local ranchers, paced along the fence line, her movements powerful and deliberate. Clara had heard stories about this particular cat. She was notorious for her size and cunning, having eluded capture countless times. And now here she was, having somehow tracked her injured kitten across miles of wilderness. Clara's heart raced as she watched the magnificent creature. Fear and awe mingled in her chest. Fear because she knew how dangerous a mother bobcat could be, especially one of Red Claw's reputation. And awe at the sheer determination that had brought her here. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene. Red Claw had risen onto her hind legs, pressing against the fence, her eyes boring into the building as if she could see straight through to her kitten. The raw devotion in that gaze struck Clara like a physical force. "You didn't abandon him," Clara murmured, pressing her hand against the cool glass. "You never stopped looking." She glanced back at the examination table where the kitten lay sleeping. The same fierce spirit she'd seen in those golden eyes now made perfect sense. It was his mother's spirit too. Both of them refusing to give up, defying the odds that said they should. Red Claw's cries continued through the night, a haunting melody of maternal desperation. Clara remained at her post by the window, witnessing this extraordinary demonstration of nature's bonds. She'd worked with wildlife for years, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. A mother's love strong enough to track a scent through storms and darkness across any distance. The sight of Red Claw's unwavering vigil strengthened Clara's resolve. If this fierce mother hadn't given up on her kitten, how could Clara do any less? Dr. Caro's practical voice echoed in her mind, reminding her not to get emotionally involved. But watching Red Claw's devotion, Clara knew that emotions, love, determination, hope, were not weaknesses to be dismissed. Sometimes they were the very things that made survival possible. The morning sun streamed through the facility's windows, casting long shadows across the examination room. Clara's eyes were tired from her sleepless night, but determination kept her standing straight. As she faced Dr. Caro in his office, "You should have seen her, Dr. Caro," Clara said, her voice urgent. "The mother bobcat tracked her kitten here. She was right outside the fence." Dr. Caro barely looked up from his paperwork, his thin fingers adjusting his reading glasses. "Miss Donahue, you were alone, exhausted, and it was storming. The mind plays tricks under such conditions, but I saw her clearly," Clara protested. "She had this distinctive reddish coat and a torn ear. She'd enough." Caro's sharp tone cut through the air. We have more pressing matters to discuss than imaginary bobcat sightings. Before Clara could argue further, heavy boots thundered. Down the hallway, 3 ranchers burst into the office, their faces red with anger and their hands gripping their hat brims. The tallest one, his weathered face creased with fury, stepped forward. "That devil cat's been at it again," he spat. "Found some more calves dead this morning. This has got to stop, Caro." Clara's heart sank as she recognized the description of Red Claw's hunting grounds. Dr. Caro stood, suddenly attentive in a way he hadn't been for Clara's story. "Which area?" he asked, reaching for his map. "Miller's Creek, same as last week." Another rancher said, "That red-coated menace is getting bolder. Someone saw her yesterday, same torn ear. We've been hearing about for months." Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was the exact description she'd given moments ago. But now Dr. Caro was nodding seriously, all traces of skepticism gone. "If that cat shows up here again," the first rancher declared, "we want permission to end this problem once and for all." Clara watched in horror as Dr. Caro's expression shifted into something calculating. "Actually, gentlemen, this might work out perfectly. We have her injured offspring here. Nature has provided us an opportunity." "What do you mean?" Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking. "If the mother returns, she'll be drawn to this facility. One clean shot would solve both our problems, the livestock killings and the burden of a paralyzed kitten that can't survive in the wild anyway." The ranchers nodded in grim satisfaction, but Clara felt sick to her stomach. The miracle of maternal devotion she'd witnessed last night was being twisted into a death sentence. "You can't," she burst out. "That's not what we're here for. This is a wildlife rehabilitation center, not a hunting ground." Dr. Caro fixed her with a cold stare. "Miss Donahue, your position here is provisional. I suggest you remember that before questioning operational decisions." Clara fell silent, but her mind raced. The threat to her job hung heavy in the air, but heavier still was the weight of what she knew to be right. Through the window, she caught movement in the tree line, a flash of reddish fur. Red Claw was still there, watching, waiting, driven by a love that transcended human understanding. The ranchers left with Caro's blessing to return armed, their boots echoing down the hall like a countdown. Clara stood alone in the office, her hands clenched into fist. Everything she'd worked for, her position, her future in wildlife rehabilitation, balanced against what she knew in her heart was right. Outside, a shadow moved through the underbrush. Clara watched as Red Claw emerged briefly into a patch of sunlight. The bobcat's golden eyes met hers through the window, filled with the same fierce determination she'd seen in her kitten's gaze. In that moment, Clara understood that some things mattered more than keeping your head down and following orders. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking each precious moment before the ranchers would return with their rifles. Clara felt the weight of 2 lives, mother and kitten, resting in her trembling hands. Dr. Caro's warning about her job echoed in her mind, but it was drowned out by the memory of Red Claw's cries in the night, calling for her baby with a mother's undying love. Clara's heart raced as she wheeled the small cart containing the injured bobcat kitten toward the outdoor recovery pen. The metal wheels squeaked softly against the concrete floor, making her wince with each turn. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, checking for any sign of Dr. Caro or the other staff members. The hallway remained empty, lit only by the pale emergency lights. The outdoor recovery pen was rarely used these days, a large enclosure with natural ground, scattered brush, and a small wooden shelter, perfect for what Clara had in mind. Her hands trembled slightly as she punched in the security code and pushed through the heavy door into the cool night air. "Easy now, little one," she whispered, carefully lifting the kitten's carrier. The tiny creature's golden eyes watched her intently, but it remained still, its back legs motionless. Clara arranged fresh bedding in the wooden shelter, making sure it was soft and warm. She placed water and food nearby, positioning everything so the kitten could reach it without having to move much. "I know this is against protocol," she murmured, gently transferring the kitten to its new space. "But sometimes protocols need to be broken to do what's right." Clara settled herself in the observation booth adjacent to the pen, a small shed-like structure with one-way glass windows. Her stomach churned with anxiety. If Dr. Caro discovered what she'd done, she'd likely lose her position. But the memory of Red Claw's determined eyes through the fence steeled her resolve. Hours passed. Clara fought to stay awake, sipping coffee from her thermos. The moon rose high overhead, casting silver light across the pen. Then, around midnight, movement caught her eye. A shadow detached itself from the darkness beyond the fence. Red Claw emerged, her scarred face visible in the moonlight. The mother bobcat approached the pen's outer fence with careful steps, her nose testing the air. Clara held her breath, watching intently through the observation window. To her amazement, Red Claw carried something in her mouth, a freshly caught rabbit. The large cat circled the pen several times, studying every angle. Then, displaying remarkable dexterity, she managed to push the rabbit through a gap between the fence panels. One Clara hadn't even noticed was there. The mother bobcat's behavior that followed left Clara speechless. Instead of trying to drag her kitten away or attack the enclosure, Red Claw positioned the rabbit near the shelter's entrance. She made soft chirping sounds, calls Clara had never heard before, encouraging the kitten to eat. The little one responded with weak mews, dragging itself forward slightly with its front paws. Red Claw waited patiently, continuing her gentle vocalizations. When the kitten struggled to reach the food, she nudged the rabbit closer, making it easier for her offspring to access. Clara watched in wonder as this continued for over an hour. Red Claw didn't just feed her kitten. She seemed to be teaching it, encouraging it to move, to stretch, to try using its legs. The mother cat would demonstrate movements, then wait expectantly, chirping encouragement when the kitten made even the smallest effort. This isn't just instinct, Clara whispered to herself, scribbling rapid notes. She's actually trying to help it recover. Her eyes filled with tears as she watched Red Claw gently groom her kitten. Through the fence, the mother's rough tongue, carefully cleaning her offspring's fur, paying special attention to the paralyzed legs as if trying to stimulate them. The scene before her was like nothing Clara had ever witnessed. In her years of wildlife work, this wasn't just a mother's blind instinct to protect, it was calculated care, adapted to her kitten's specific needs. Red Claw was essentially providing physical therapy, encouraging movement and strength building in ways that eerily mirrored human rehabilitation techniques. As dawn approached, Red Claw reluctantly retreated into the wilderness, but not before, making several careful circles of the pen, as if memorizing every detail of where her kitten was kept. Clara sat back in her chair, emotionally overwhelmed by what she'd witnessed. Her notebook was filled with detailed observations, proof that there was so much more happening here than Dr. Caro or the angry ranchers could understand. For the first time since the injured kitten had arrived, Clara felt real hope bloom in her chest. This wasn't just about keeping the kitten alive. There was a chance for actual recovery, guided by the most dedicated physical therapist nature could provide. Red Claw wasn't just a threat to livestock or a nuisance to be eliminated. She was a mother fighting for her child's recovery with intelligence and dedication that defied all expectations. Clara gathered her notes and supplies, preparing to return the kitten to its indoor enclosure before the morning staff arrived. Her mind raced with possibilities. Somehow, she had to find a way to protect both mother and child, to give them the time they needed. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but at least now she knew one thing with certainty. There was more hope for this kitten than anyone had imagined. Clara huddled in the observation booth each night, her notebook balanced on her knees as she documented every detail of Red Claw's visits. The mother bobcat had established a pattern now, arriving shortly after midnight when the facility was at its quietest. Her dedication never wavered, even on nights when rain poured from the Arizona sky. 8:15 p.m., kitten showing increased response to sound stimuli, Clara wrote, her pen scratching softly against paper. 10:40 p.m., attempted to push up with back legs for the first time. She recorded everything, building a careful record of the small but meaningful changes she observed. Tonight, like every night, Red Claw appeared with fresh prey, a desert cottontail. The scarred mother cat moved with purposeful grace, depositing her offering near her kitten. Clara leaned forward, watching intently as Red Claw began what could only be described as a rehabilitation session. The mother bobcat's actions were methodical. She would gently grip one of the kitten's paralyzed legs in her mouth, stretching it out and then allowing it to retract. Over and over, she repeated this motion. Like a physical therapist working with a patient, the kitten mewed softly but didn't resist, seeming to understand his mother's intentions. This isn't random, Clara whispered to herself, adding another note. She's exercising the muscles, preventing atrophy. Her hand trembled slightly as she sketched a quick diagram of the stretching pattern Red Claw used. During the day, however, Clara certainly faced constant challenges. Dr. Caro's tall figure would loom over her desk as she tried to complete her regular duties, his skepticism cutting like a knife. Still wasting resources on that hopeless case, he asked one morning, his thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. The longer we wait, the harder it will be. Clara straightened her spine, meeting his cold gaze. I'm documenting measurable improvements, she insisted, gesturing to her notes. The kitten is showing increased mobility and wishful thinking. Caro interrupted, turning away, and these fantasies about the mother cat performing therapy. Clara, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. The ranchers were even worse. They arrived nearly every day now, their boots tracking dust across the facility's floors. Their voices growing louder with each visit. Clara could hear them from her workstation, demanding action against Red Claw. That devil cat took down 2 more calves last night, one of them growled to Caro. How long before you do something about this? Clara's hands clenched into fist under her desk. She knew Red Claw was hunting to feed her injured kitten, but trying to explain that to the angry ranchers would be futile. They saw only the threat to their livelihood, not the desperate mother fighting to save her child. At night, watching Red Claw's gentle ministrations through the observation window, Clara felt the weight of her position crushing down on her. The mother cat would spend hours grooming her kitten, paying special attention to the paralyzed legs, the repetitive strokes seeming to stimulate circulation. She would encourage the little one to move, positioning prey just out of reach, chirping encouragement when her offspring made even the smallest effort to reach it. Clara's notebook filled with detailed observations. 11:25 p.m. Mother demonstrates stalking posture, waits for kitten to imitate. 11:45 p.m. Kitten achieves partial weight bearing on right hind leg for 3 seconds. The proof was there, growing stronger with each passing night. Clara saw it in the way the kitten's movements became more coordinated, in the increasing strength of its cries, in the moments when its back legs twitched with purpose rather than just reflex. Red Claw wasn't just feeding her offspring. She was implementing a comprehensive rehabilitation program that rivaled anything humans might have designed. Yet during daylight hours, Clara felt increasingly isolated. Other staff members avoided, her eyes clearly siding with Caro's practical approach. The ranchers' hostile stares followed her whenever they visited, as if they blamed her personally for Red Claw's continued freedom. Still, each small victory strengthened her resolve. When the kitten managed to pull itself fully upright for the first time, Clara had to press her hand against her mouth to keep from crying out in joy. When Red Claw responded to this achievement by bringing an extra piece of prey, as if in celebration, Clara's conviction deepened further. This wasn't just about saving one kitten anymore. Clara recognized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a demonstration of animal intelligence and maternal devotion that defied conventional understanding. Red Claw's determined rehabilitation efforts proved that there was more complexity to wildlife than most humans were willing to acknowledge. She carefully dated each entry in her notebook, knowing that someday this record might be the only thing standing between life and death for both mother and kitten. The page is filled with detailed observations, sketches, and noted improvements, creating an undeniable chronicle of recovery against all odds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center as Clara made her way to check on the Bobcat Kitten. Her footsteps echoed through the quiet hallway. But the peace was short-lived. Through the window, she spotted 3 pickup trucks kicking up dust as they roared down the facility's gravel driveway. Her heart sank. The ranchers were back, and this time they meant business. Their rifles glinted in the early light as they climbed out of their vehicles. Clara's hands trembled as she clutched her clipboard closer to her chest. "Where's Caro?" demanded Tom Miller, the most vocal of the ranchers. His weathered face was red with anger, his jaw set tight beneath his cowboy hat. That killer cat struck again last night, 2 more calves gone. Before Clara could respond, Dr. Caro emerged from his office, his thin frame rigid with tension. "Gentlemen, let's discuss this reasonably." Reasonable went out the window weeks ago. Another rancher spat. He hefted his rifle meaningfully. "We've lost thousands of dollars worth of livestock. That cat's gotta go." Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "You don't know it was Red Claw. There are other predators in the area, Red Claw." Tom Miller's eyes narrowed. "You named the damn thing. This isn't some pet we're talking about. Girl, it's a menace." Dr. Caro raised his hands placatingly. "I understand your frustration. The situation has escalated beyond what we can handle here. I'll make some calls to enforcement today. They can set up a proper hunt." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She thought of Red Claw's nightly visits, the gentle way the mother bobcat tended to her injured kitten, the scientific observations she'd been gathering suddenly felt meaningless in the face of loaded rifles and angry men. "Dr. Caro, please," she pleaded, "just give me more time. The kitten is showing improvement, and Red Claw's behavior is unprecedented. We could learn so much." "Enough, Clara." Caro cut her off sharply. His stern features hardened. "This isn't about your research anymore. This is about public safety and protecting livestock. The mother cat has become too bold, too dangerous." The ranchers nodded in agreement, their boots scraping against the floor as they shifted impatiently. Clara looked from face to face, seeing nothing but determination and anger. They would show no mercy to Red Claw. "We'll set up tonight," Tom Miller declared. "That cat's been coming regular, hasn't she?" We'll be ready when she shows. Clara's mind raced. She knew Red Claw would return. The mother bobcat hadn't missed a single night since finding her kitten. The thought of those rifles trained on the devoted mother made her feel sick. Dr. Caro nodded grimly. I'll contact the proper authorities. We'll handle this professionally and legally. He turned to Clara, his voice stern. You are not to interfere. Understood. This is far bigger than your attachment to these animals. But Clara barely heard him. Her decision was already made, crystallizing in her heart with surprising clarity. She couldn't let them murder Red Claw. The mother bobcat's dedication to her injured kitten went beyond mere instinct. Clara had watched night after night as Red Claw worked to rehabilitate her offspring, displaying an intelligence and devotion that deserved protection, not destruction. The ranchers filed out, discussing their plans for the evening's ambush. Dr. Caro retreated to his office to make his calls. Clara stood alone in the hallway, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. She had until nightfall to figure out how to save both mother and kitten. Her mind whirled with possibilities and dangers. She could lose her position at the center. She might face legal consequences. But the image of Red Claw's gentle attention to her kitten strengthened Clara's resolve. Some things were worth risking. Everything for walking to the outdoor recovery pen. Clara watched the bobcat kitten attempting to drag itself forward with its front legs. Its golden eyes held that same fierce determination she'd seen from the first night. Like mother, like child, neither one willing to give up. I won't let them hurt your mama, she whispered to the kitten. I promise. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Clara began to plan. She would need to act before dusk, before the hunters could set up their deadly vigil. Time was running out, and the weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. But as she watched the kitten struggle bravely with its exercises, Clara knew she couldn't live with herself if she did nothing. The sound of boots on gravel made her turn. Through the window, she could see the ranchers loading their rifles into their trucks, presumably to prepare for tonight. Dr. Caro stood in his office doorway, phone pressed to his ear, no doubt coordinating with enforcement officials. The pieces were falling into place for Red Claw's execution. Clara squared her shoulders, her fear giving way to determination. She had spent her life being dismissed as too soft-hearted, too emotional about the animals in her care. But today, that same heart would give her the courage to stand between killers and their prey. She wouldn't let them destroy this remarkable example of maternal devotion, not while she still had breath in her body to prevent it. The evening shadows stretched long across the rehabilitation center's grounds as Clara paced anxiously near the outdoor recovery pen. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she checked her watch again. 7:30. Red Claw usually appeared around this time. Through the gathering dusk, she could make out the shapes of the ranchers' trucks parked behind the tree line. They thought they were being stealthy, but Clara knew exactly where they waited. Dr. Caro had stationed himself in his office, lights off, watching through the window. The air crackled with tension. A soft scraping sound drew Clara's attention. Her breath caught as she spotted Red Claw's familiar scarred form approaching the fence. The mother bobcat moved with her usual purposeful grace, a fresh rabbit dangling from her jaws. Tonight's dinner for her recovering kitten. No, Clara whispered. Not tonight, please. But Red Claw was already at the fence, and the night erupted into chaos. Truck doors slammed, boots pounded across dirt, rifles clicked as they were raised to shoulders. The ranchers emerged from their hiding spots, weapons trained on the startled bobcat. Move aside, girl. Tom Miller's voice rang out harsh and commanding, but Clara was already moving. She planted herself firmly between the rifles and Red Claw, arms spread wide. Her whole body trembled, but her voice rang out clear and strong. Stop. You can't do this. Get out of the way, another rancher shouted. That cat's been killing our livestock for months. She's just trying to feed her baby. Clara's voice shook but held firm. Look at her, really look. She's not some mindless killer. Behind her, Red Claw hadn't fled. The bobcat remained by the fence, hackles raised but standing her ground. The rabbit lay forgotten at her feet as she focused intently on her kitten in the recovery pen. Clara, Dr. Caro's voice cut through the darkness as he hurried from his office. This is madness. Step aside immediately. I won't. Tears streamed down Clara's face, but her determination never wavered. If you want to kill her, you'll have to go through me first. The confrontation might have ended there, with Clara's brave stand forcing a stalemate. But fate had other plans. As several ranchers moved forward, attempting to circle round Clara's position, their movement spooked Red Claw. The large bobcat backed away from the fence, directly into a section weakened by recent storms. The metal groaned, twisted, and gave way with a thunderous crash. Suddenly, there was nothing between Clara and the wild predators she'd been protecting. she froze, painfully aware of her vulnerability. Behind her, rifled barrels tracked Red Claw's every move. One wrong step from anyone would trigger disaster. Time seemed to stop. Clara could hear her own ragged breathing, feel her heart pounding. She was caught between armed men and a cornered wild animal, literally trapped between two deadly forces. The rancher's fingers tightened on their triggers. Red Claw's muscles bunched, ready to spring. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of attacking or fleeing, Red Claw moved with deliberate care toward the recovery pen. In one fluid motion, she positioned herself over her kitten, who had been crying softly since the commotion began. Her powerful body formed a protective arch over her offspring, but her eyes, those fierce golden eyes, locked onto Clara's with startling intelligence. In that moment, Clara understood. They were the same, two females standing guard over an innocent life, refusing to back down in the face of threat. The recognition flowed between them like an electric current. The ranchers saw it too. The rifles lowered slightly as they witnessed this unexpected display of maternal devotion. The very thing Clara had been trying to tell them was playing out before their eyes. This wasn't a mindless killer, but a mother fighting for her child's survival. "Well, I'll be damned," Tom Miller muttered, his rifle barrel dipping toward the ground. Even Dr. Caro had fallen silent, watching the scene unfold with undisguised amazement. The night air hummed with the weight of this unprecedented moment. Human and wild animal united in protection, fear giving way to understanding. Red Claw maintained her protective stance over her kitten, but her posture had relaxed slightly. She wasn't preparing to attack. Instead, she held her position with dignified calm, as if knowing she had made her point. Her eyes never left Clara's face, and Clara felt tears rolling down her cheeks at the profound connection she felt with this fierce mother. The kitten mewed softly beneath its mother's protection, and Clara watched as Red Claw gently nuzzled it, offering comfort while keeping a watchful eye on the humans. The simple gesture of maternal tenderness seemed to drain the last of the hostility from the air. One by one, the ranchers lowered their weapons completely. The night settled into an astonished quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of mother and baby bobcat communing in their own private language of love and protection. In this moment of miraculous unity, Clara felt a deep sense of vindication. Everything she had tried to explain about Red Claw's extraordinary behavior, everything she had observed about the depth of the mother bobcat's dedication, it had all been proven true in the most dramatic way possible. The tense standoff was broken by the sudden flash of red and blue lights. Sheriff Martinez's patrol car pulled up to the facility, followed by two other police vehicles. Their arrival sent waves of relief through Clara. Help had come just in time. "What in blazes is going on here?" Sheriff Martinez demanded, emerging from his vehicle. His weathered face creased with concern as he took in the scene, armed ranchers, the broken fence, and Clara standing between them and a wild bobcat. Clara saw her chance. "Sheriff, please, before anyone does anything, you need to see something." Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. "I've been documenting everything." The sheriff approached cautiously, keeping one eye on Red Claw while Clara pulled up her videos. The footage was clear, night after night of Red Claw returning, not to attack, but to care for her injured kitten. The mother bobcat bringing food, grooming her baby, and most importantly, performing those deliberate movements with the paralyzed legs. "Look at how she's working with him," Clara explained, her voice gaining strength. "She's not just feeding him, she's trying to help him heal. She's been doing physical therapy in her own way." Sheriff Martinez's expression shifted from skepticism to fascination as he watched. "I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of law enforcement." Other officers gathered around to watch, their faces reflecting growing amazement. Even the ranchers, still gripping their rifles, edged closer to see the evidence of Red Claw's extraordinary behavior. Dr. Caro stood slightly apart, his usual stern expression cracking as he watched the videos. Clara could see him struggling with what the evidence was showing. Everything he had dismissed as impossible was playing out on the small screen. The timestamps proved this has been going on for days, Clara pointed out, every night. Like clockwork. She's not a menace, she's a mother trying to save her baby. As if to emphasize Clara's words, Red Claw continued her gentle ministrations with the kitten. Everyone watched, transfixed, as she began her familiar routine of massaging and stretching her offspring's limp legs. Then something happened that made Clara's heart leap into her throat. The kitten's right hind leg twitched. At first, she thought she might have imagined it, but no, there it was again. A distinct, purposeful movement. Small, but unmistakable. "Dr. Caro," Clara called out, her voice breaking with excitement. Look. The veterinarian stepped forward, professional interest overriding his previous skepticism. The kitten's leg twitched again, more strongly this time, in response to Red Claw's persistent nudging. "That's not just a reflex," Dr. Caro murmured, his clinical detachment finally crumbling. "That's voluntary movement." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes. All her hopes, all her stubborn defiance, it hadn't been in vain. The kitten was fighting back, proving that sometimes faith and persistence could overcome the bleakest odds. Sheriff Martinez turned to the ranchers, his voice firm but understanding. "Gentlemen, I think we need to reconsider our approach here. What we're seeing isn't just unusual, it's extraordinary." Tom Miller, the most vocal of the ranchers, slowly lowered his rifle completely. "Never thought I'd say this, but maybe we were too quick to judge. That mama cat's something else." Dr. Caro cleared his throat, clearly struggling with what he needed to say next. "Clara," he began, his voice unusually hesitant, "I owe you an apology. Your instincts about this case, they were right. I was too quick to dismiss the possibility of recovery." Clara could hardly believe her ears. The admission from the usually unbending veterinarian meant almost as much as the kitten's. "Movement. What happens now?" one of the officers asked, breaking the momentary silence. Clara looked at Red Claw, still tenderly working with her kitten, then at Dr. Caro. "We give them a chance," she said firmly. "We let this mother continue what she's been doing, and we document everything. This could change how we understand wildlife rehabilitation." Sheriff Martinez nodded. "I'll work with the ranchers on alternative solutions for protecting their livestock. Maybe we can find a way to coexist." The kitten's leg twitched again, stronger this time, and Clara felt hope surge through her chest. She watched as Red Claw continued her patient work, the mother bobcat's dedication unwavering. In that moment, Clara knew that sometimes the most powerful force for healing wasn't found in medical textbooks or clinical procedures. It was found in the unshakable bond between a mother and her child, and in the persistence of those who refused to give up on a miracle. News of the miraculous developments at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center spread like wildfire through the small Arizona community. Within days, the facility's parking lot began filling with curious onlookers, local news vans, and wildlife experts eager to witness the extraordinary bond between Red Claw and her recovering kitten. Clara watched from her usual spot near the outdoor recovery pen as another group of visitors pressed their faces against the viewing windows. She could hear their gasps of amazement as Red Claw, now comfortable with the constant attention, continued her dedicated rehabilitation routine with her kitten. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Sarah, one of the newer volunteers, as she joined Clara during the morning feeding. "The way she works with those legs, it's like she knows exactly what needs to be done." "She does know," Clara replied softly, making notes in her observation log. "She's been proving it all along." The kitten's progress had become undeniable. What started as tiny twitches had developed into more coordinated movements. Though still weak, the back legs now responded consistently to Red Claw's persistent therapy sessions. Dr. Caro had been documenting everything meticulously. His initial skepticism transformed into professional fascination. "Miss Donahue, Dr. Caro called out as he approached the observation area, his worn lab coat flapping in the morning breeze. "I've just gotten off the phone with the State Wildlife Commission. They're sending a representative next week to evaluate our situation." Clara felt her chest tighten with anxiety, and he continued, allowing himself a small smile. "They seem very interested in establishing this as a precedent case for natural rehabilitation protocols. Your documentation has been invaluable." The admission clearly cost him something, but Clara could see the genuine respect in his eyes now. Gone was the dismissive attitude that had once made her feel so small and uncertain. Later that afternoon, Clara was surprised to see Tom Miller's pickup truck pulling into the parking lot. The rancher who had once been so intent on Red Claw's destruction now stepped out looking almost sheepish, his hat clutched in his weathered hands. "Miss Clara," he nodded as he approached, "been talking with the other ranchers. We've been doing some thinking about this whole situation." Clara braced herself, but Miller's next words surprised her. "We've decided to support the protection order for Red Claw and her kitten," he said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "Watching that mama cat, well, it's changed some minds around here. We're working with the county on setting up better fencing and getting some guard dogs. Figure we can find a way to live and let live." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes as she thanked him. This was the breakthrough she'd been hoping for. The rancher's support would be crucial for securing long-term protection for the bobcats. The next few days brought a flurry of activity. Wildlife officials arrived to assess the situation, examining Clara's detailed records and observing Red Claw's interactions with her kitten. They were particularly interested in the mother bobcat's rehabilitation techniques. which seemed to mirror modern physical therapy practices. This could revolutionize how we approach wildlife rehabilitation, Dr. Elena Santos, the lead wildlife commissioner, explained during her evaluation. The mother's instinctive knowledge, combined with her dedication, it's unprecedented in documented cases. Clara worked tirelessly with the officials to draft protection measures that would satisfy both wildlife preservation needs and local ranchers' concerns. They identified a protected area several miles from the nearest ranch, where Red Claw and her kitten could eventually be relocated once the young one was strong enough. The protection order came through on a sunny Wednesday morning. Clara's hands shook as she read the official document, taken in the formal language that guaranteed Red Claw and her kitten's safety. No more threats of euthanasia. No more fear of hunters. They would be protected until their release, and their new territory would be designated as a wildlife sanctuary. Dr. Caro found her still holding the document, tears streaming down her face. "You did this," he said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your compassion, your persistence, you changed everything. Not just for these two, but for how we approach cases like this in the future." Clara wiped her eyes, watching as Red Claw guided her kitten through another therapy session. The young bobcat was now able to support its own weight for short periods, its golden eyes bright with determination that matched its mother's. The day's biggest surprise came when a group of local ranchers arrived, led by Tom Miller. They had come with an unexpected proposal. They wanted to help fund the new sanctuary area. Their plan included installing special fencing that would protect both wildlife and livestock, creating a sustainable solution for everyone. "Reckon we've learned something about judgment and patience," Miller admitted, as the group watched Red Claw work with her kitten. "Sometimes the thing you think is your enemy just needs a chance to prove otherwise." As the sun began to set, Clara sat at her desk, updating her final notes for the day. The facility had grown quiet, the visitors gone home, leaving only the peaceful sounds of mother and child in their recovery pen. She felt bone-tired but deeply satisfied. Every obstacle that had once seemed insurmountable had fallen away, transformed by the power of persistence and compassion. Through her office window, she could see Red Claw curled protectively around her kitten, both of them resting after another day of hard work. The sight brought a smile to Clara's face as she remembered those first desperate hours, when she'd fought so hard just to give them a chance. The protection order on her desk represented more than just safety for the bobcats. It represented a shift in how humans and wildlife could coexist, how persistence could overcome prejudice, and how sometimes the most powerful medicine was simply refusing to give up hope. The early morning sun painted the Arizona desert in shades of gold and pink as Clara watched the transport vehicle being loaded. Her heart felt like it might burst with a mixture of joy and bittersweet emotion. After weeks of struggle and uncertainty, this moment felt almost unreal. The large transport cage contained both Red Claw and her kitten, who now showed remarkable progress in his recovery. The little one's back legs, once lifeless, now moved with growing strength. Clara couldn't help but smile as she remembered the first tiny twitch that had given them all hope. "I have to admit, I was wrong," Dr. Caro said, standing beside her. His usual stern expression had softened. "What you saw in them, what you fought for, it was extraordinary." Clara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "It taught us all something about never giving up." The sanctuary staff secured the cage doors with practiced efficiency. The location they had chosen was perfect, a protected wilderness area far from ranches and human settlements with plenty of natural prey and water sources. It was everything Clara had hoped for when she'd first started fighting for their survival. The paperwork's all finished, one of the sanctuary workers called out. "We're ready to move." Clara approached the cage one last time. Red Claw's fierce eyes met hers, but there was no hostility in them now. The great cat remained calm, her scarred face and torn ear testament to the battles she'd fought to protect her baby. The kitten pressed against his mother's side, his golden eyes bright and alert. "You did it," Clara whispered to them both. "You proved them all wrong." The drive to the release site took nearly 2 hours. Clara rode in the transport vehicle, keeping watch over her charges. Every bump in the road made her heart jump, but Red Claw remained remarkably steady, as if she somehow understood this journey meant freedom. When they finally arrived at the release point, Clara helped position the cage facing the wilderness. The location was beautiful, a rugged landscape of rocky outcrops and desert vegetation that would provide perfect cover for the bobcat family. "Ready?" the sanctuary director asked. Clara wiped tears from her eyes and nodded. With careful movements, they opened the cage door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Red Claw emerged, cautious but dignified. The kitten followed, his movements still a bit unsteady, but growing stronger each day. They paused at the cage entrance, and Clara held her breath. That's when Red Claw did something remarkable. She turned her head and looked directly at Clara. Their eyes met one final time, and in that moment, Clara felt a profound connection, an acknowledgement of their shared journey. Their combined fight against impossible odds. It lasted only seconds, but Clara knew she would remember it forever. Then, with powerful grace, Red Claw led her kitten into the wilderness. They moved steadily across the rocky ground, the kitten keeping pace with growing confidence. Clara watched, through tears of joy as they disappeared into the desert landscape, their forms gradually blending with the natural world that was now their home. Well, I'd say that's a success, the sanctuary director said warmly. You should be proud, Clara. Not many people would have fought so hard. Clara wiped her eyes, feeling a profound sense of completion. She had started this journey as just another volunteer, often dismissed as too emotional, too invested. Now she stood vindicated, her compassion proven not as weakness but as strength. Her belief in the power of love and dedication had created what many had deemed impossible, a miracle of survival and recovery. The experience had changed her forever. She was no longer the uncertain volunteer hoping to make a difference. She had become someone who knew, with unshakable certainty, that compassion could overcome any obstacle, even death itself. As they packed up to leave, Clara took one last look at the wilderness where Red Claw and her kitten had disappeared. The morning sun had risen fully now, bathing the desert in brilliant light. Somewhere out there, a mother and child were beginning their new life, their bond unbroken, their future bright with possibility. Their story would stay with her always, a testament to the power of devotion, the strength of maternal love, and the importance of standing firm in what you believe, even when everyone else tells you it's impossible. If tonight's story sat quietly in your heart, subscribe and send it to someone who might need the same comfort.